So 2015 marked the year that the majority of people got their news from social media rather than from search engines. Now, this seems fairly innocuous, but actually it's a fairly fundamental shift, because really it's the first time that we've had content pushed to us rather than pulled. So what I mean by that is really it's the first time that we've been reliant on our friends, on our family, and on social media algorithms to choose what to show us and when, rather than our previous proactive attempts at searching for a particular news item or a particular topic. And it's also no coincidence that since 2015, we've seen a huge amount of political upheaval. Trump, Brexit, even the recent UK and French general elections. So it's more important than ever that we understand the technology that underlies these platforms, as well as the effects that it has on us and our abilities to actually make our own opinions. Because history's kind of showed us that culture and technology are inextricably intertwined. If you look in the early 1940s, early 1950s, it was really when American TV was going through its golden age. It was becoming the first instance of true mass media. It was dominated by just 3 channels, and there were certain programs that were watched by upwards of 80% of all households in America. So what it lacked in diverse content, it made up for in cohesiveness, because it encouraged people to talk about things around that proverbial water cooler. And it was many, many decades until this changed. It was really when cable television came along. And cable TV catered for a niche rather than for a nation. And the reason it did that was because advertisers could more appropriately target those niche audiences. So kind of spurred on by that commercial incentive, we saw an explosion from those 3 channels into hundreds and hundreds of channels. Now, this kind of represented a diversification of viewpoints, which was great, but social commentators at the time kind of lamented this return to a more fractured social order. In effect, people had fewer and fewer things to talk about around that same water cooler. And this was just the beginning. Because when the internet came along, it gave everybody a voice. And because that was born out of academia, rather than these commercial interests, we saw singly the biggest explosion in information in human history. And so because of this explosion in information, we needed to come up with new and innovative ways on how to aggregate and filter that data. Now, this is nothing new. Anyone that's been on Amazon and Netflix has seen this kind of technology in play. People who bought this product also bought this. People who watch this also watch that. Basing those kinds of recommendations on your data and on the data of people similar to you. Google uses literally hundreds of data points. It could be your gender, your physical location, your search history, to better personalize the search results and get that information to you quicker. But really, it was only when social media came along that how we consumed this content changed dramatically. Early versions of these platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, etc., used simple chronological listings of these tweets, the status updates, photos, blogs, etc. But very quickly, with billions of users, trillions of connections, again, these companies needed to innovate even further. Now, Facebook did this in a really, really simple way. The like button. That gave us a way to show our approval on certain status updates, on certain photos, etc. But the genius behind it was it allowed Facebook to garner a much deeper insight into the content that was being shared on their platform. They could then rank this content by popularity. But most importantly, they could rank future content on individual relevancy by looking at what we'd previously liked or engaged with. So, all of these kind of platforms, whether it's Amazon, Netflix, Facebook, Google, what they're doing is filtering data in a way that feels relevant to me so that they can monetize me and my activities online. This kind of feels like a win-win situation, right? I'm in the center of my own little information universe with all of the content that I find interesting or engaging or pertinent that I can just pick and choose from. All the while, these social media companies are building up a highly accurate profile of me and what my likes are, that they then sell to advertisers who can target me in an increasingly more appropriate manner. There is a problem with this, though. Because for everything that they do show me, what do they not show me? Now, again, this can be pretty innocuous. So for every cat video I watch, and I do watch a lot of them, there's probably a whole bunch that I miss out on. For every photo of my little niece and nephew that I like, I probably miss out on a whole bunch of baby photos that my friends have uploaded. That I can certainly live with. But what about news items? What about political commentary, op-eds, research papers? If I like an article that has a particular liberal-leaning bias, or I only read political commentary from a Western hemisphere, or I share an article about immigration or about climate change denial, I am considerably more likely to be shown similar content at a later date. Now, this is not because Facebook or any of the other platforms have some innate understanding of what a conservative or a liberal bias is, nor do they understand the deep semantics of those topics. They're just looking at what I previously liked and finding future content they can also show me to engage with. So as our news feeds become more and more tailored, we need to really watch out for this social media echo chamber. I spoke earlier about TV and cable. Now, those producers needed to create content that had a broad set of viewpoints so that that content would create an audience around it. But on the internet, sort of paradoxically, it's the largest mass media platform we have ever created. But these algorithms allow for an audience of one. And no matter how niche the content or how disparate the audience, these algorithms will be able to piece people together to showcase that content too. Now, in and of itself, this is no bad thing, right? Giving everyone an equal footing is an incredibly powerful tool for free speech. But when we're only shown content that reinforces our previously held beliefs, with no alternatives, no dissent, no kind of serendipitous stumbling across new and innovative ideas, we start to build a bubble around ourselves. Now, Elie Pariser is a vocal opponent of what he terms the filter bubble, which he actually calls a self-reinforcing pattern of narrowing exposure that reduces user creativity, learning, and connection. And he actually argues that our ability to synthesize and simplify new information is the very root of our intelligence. And these kind of algorithms trap us in environments of our own creation. And this might actually get worse before it gets better. So we're on the verge of something that we're calling the fourth industrial revolution. This is where artificial intelligence, other advanced digital technologies creep into our day-to-day lives. And you can see how an AI-augmented filtering algorithm is a bit of a double-edged sword. Because if that artificially intelligent algorithm can understand the content, if it can watch a video and know what it's about, then it can provide me with even more interesting, even more pertinent, even more engaging content. But at that same time, it will also reinforce that filter bubble that I'm building around myself. There's one final thing that we need to consider, and that's how the absolute amorality of these algorithms affect our own moral views. I'll give you two simple examples. If you go on any image search website, type in the phrase beautiful skin, you will see a sea of white faces. And that's not because there's any racial bias built into the algorithm itself, but instead what it's doing is it's looking at the data and surfacing a latent historical trend within our own society. Similarly, in 2014, Facebook released some very interesting, ethically a little bit dubious, but very interesting research where they tweaked the newsfeed algorithm for 700,000 of their users. And the idea was to show more or less positive content. And what they found was when they reduced the amount of positive content on somebody's newsfeed, that user would post less positive content themselves. So they call that the emotional contagion effect. So here we've got billions of users being picked what content to see by amoral algorithms to make us better consumers for advertising. On top of that, we know these algorithms have an emotional effect on us, but they're also hindering our ability to create informed opinions because we're inadvertently self-selecting the content that we're going to be seeing in the future. So even after all of this, some people still say to me, so what? Is this not just the new normal? Not really. I mean, I spoke earlier about cultural homogeneity, about mass media. These aren't necessarily things to aspire to, but they do have the power, for better or for worse, to unify a large group of people. Innovation, creativity, democracy, all of these things are founded on the idea that each and every one of us gets exposed to a large sort of breadth of viewpoints. We need to stimulate debate. We need to set our thinking off in some sort of tangential direction. So as we move to a world that's dominated by social media, we can't have our content split between intellectual junk food, my cat videos, or curated from an ever narrower list of content that we've self-selected ourselves as this filter bubble kind of closes in around us. So where does this leave us? And this is a multifaceted problem. It's not going to be solved by a couple of people or by yet more technology. But we are starting to see new and innovative solutions come into play. Facebook, for example, during the recent UK and French general elections, they released a tool called Perspectives. And effectively, whenever somebody shared an article about the general election, you would see a little tool that would pop up, and that would give you all of the political parties across all of the major policy areas, fiscal, housing, immigration, etc. And the idea behind that was to broaden people's exposure to different political views, to try and combat propaganda and that woefully misused term, fake news. I'm a technologist at heart, though. I believe that artificial intelligence and social media, these are forces for good. They will have a net positive benefit on the world, as long as we treat them with the maturity that they deserve, and we're kind of cognizant of the ramifications they will have on society more broadly. But the important word there is we. So as a consumer, I need to be a lot more aware of the news that I'm sharing on social media and of the sources that that's coming from. I also need to be a lot more open to the idea of actually proactively searching out alternative and dissenting ideas. My friends, my family, they need to do the same thing because they're now my primary source of information. You all need to do the same. We're all in a similar geographic area, and as such, we're all tertiary connections to each other. But importantly, social media, they're engineers, they're data scientists. They need to be acutely aware of these filtering algorithms and the effect that it has on society, particularly as artificial intelligence becomes more prevalent and direct human intervention decreases. But then as citizens, educators, academics, they need to be readying the next generation of students and children to treat this kind of technology with the maturity that those of us that grew up during this information revolution have been ill-afforded. And governments, policymakers, maybe even regulators, they need to be aware of how this technology will impact every single facet of their citizens' lives. But as information becomes the lifeblood of our economies, of our governments, of our lives in general, it will take each and every one of us to ensure that the internet, that place that does give each and every one of us a voice, doesn't have its information flow controlled by a handful of powerful technology companies that use proprietary and opaque algorithms. And advocating transparency, advocating accountability will start with each and every one of us. So there's not an easy solution to this, as you can probably tell. This is really meant to be a rallying call so that people understand that this technology exists in the platforms that they use every single day, and that these kinds of platforms are affecting, very quietly, how we form opinions, particularly political ones. So I hope this has opened your eyes. I hope you go on to open the eyes of others. And I promise you, the irony is not lost on me when I say the best way to do this would be to share this talk on Facebook. Thank you very much.